Hi, and very good morning to you. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. Over the last few days we've been talking about the real possibility of a mass evacuation of Canada. It's not just going to be Canada is affected, but we've just focused on that for start. We're going to look at some of the other countries in Europe, Eastern Europe, like Russia and other countries like that, and then we're going to have a look on the Southern Hemisphere on how that will be affected with a real event which is likely to happen, maybe, I say this, in the next 20 years, could even be a lot sooner than that. We'll look at the charts, we'll explain why we give that timeline. I think it fits well with the history and what's happened in the past events. The only thing we need to bear in mind is that there is another anomaly which is taking place right now, which could speed things up a lot quicker. Now, I can imagine how this comes across to somebody living in Canada, and over the next week or so, when we start talking about Europe and Russia and the Southern Hemispheres and how those countries are going to be affected during a glacial period, I can imagine how that would come across to someone. And I think that there is a genuine human disorder when it comes to acting logically on information given. I'll give you, for instance, a lot of people smoke. I smoke, and I drink probably too much coffee, and why not get yourself one as well and join me? But we know these things are bad for us, yet we still do them. We are an addictive species to doing the wrong thing. So I can imagine when I give the information and supply all the facts that everyone could possibly want to prove the fact of what I'm saying is absolutely going to happen. Can't say you're going to wake up tomorrow and there's going to be glaciers outside your property, but it will start from this point on, and I think we already have seen the beginnings of that because of what has happened in just this year alone with regards to the ice build-up over Arctic Circle. With regards to 2 million square kilometres of extra ice being built up in just 1 year. Now, like I say, in this video we're going to have a look at what are the significant factors that classify with regards to temperature. We're going to be looking in Celsius. You can convert it into Fahrenheit if you want, but we're going to look at Celsius. What's the critical factor that separates an interglacial period from a glacial period? And I think I've got some really good evidence, because we see the same temperature amounts fluctuate from when the Vikings arrive in Greenland to where they left 400 years ago. Greenland, they had to evacuate it, and we know today that they were more resilient than us. They had no technology which would have failed. These were hunter-gatherers still. They're probably excellent fishermen. They knew how to keep their colonies going, but when things got really too hard for them, they had to pull out, and that is exactly what happened. That was a colonisation that had no technology. Canada is as advanced as any other country in the world with technology, and that makes them more susceptible, and not just Canada but Europe as well, and Russia will be susceptible to those changes. So we know where we stand on the historical chart, long term and short term. We know exactly where we are. We're on that point where we cross from an interglacial to a glacial period. But how long does it actually take for us to get in the thickest part of the glacial period? That's at the bottom of the chart. And I think that information, which we're going to show shortly in this video, will be shocking, because it's not a lot. It's just the change of 1 degree Celsius that deciphers glacial periods from the point of interglacial periods, or the peak of interglacial periods, to the peak of glacial periods. It is exactly 1 degree, and that is what we're going to see when we look at the historical data going back to the Viking era, when they inhabited the country. 400 years later there was a 1 degree shift, and that was what put them in a glacial period, and that is exactly why they left. So what we're interested in doing a good job of science is evaluating how fast can we lose 1 degree at this specific point, and how fast did we put 1 degree on at this specific point. And then we'll be able to be in a better position to work out how long people have got before they have to start evacuating. Now, I want to just say this. There is another anomaly which has a significant factor in all climates at the moment, and that is the magnetic pole reversal. So by adding that into this, could that mean that this could happen a lot quicker? Well, I could have chosen certain things that we know about in science and studying animals that frozen years ago to win the argument, and you know where I'm going with this. The woolly mammoth that had food frozen in its mouth would indicate that whilst it was chewing it, it flash froze. I would, exempt that from this argument. I would rather look at a more realistic possibility of dramatic climate change. Now, we can look at how that affects over the years. We're going to have a look at some charts, and we can see how fast temperature has put it on, and there should be no reason why it shouldn't take it off that in that period of time. I think you'll be surprised on how long it takes actually to drop 1 degree Celsius. So getting back to the point, you get given advice, you get given all the facts and the data, but you still don't make the decision to act upon it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that is what human beings seem to do. And that could be our crack in our vessel. That could be, the level of where our intelligence stops, and we have no logical reasoning beyond that point. Because if we was more logical beings, we would definitely act upon the information right now and get ahead of the curve. And I mean, even people could profit from this, which I would cringe if I knew that that was what they was going to do. But they could certainly pull out their assets a lot earlier than the others, because can you imagine if we do in the next year start to see a glacial rebound over Canada and other northern European countries? Can you imagine everybody putting their properties up for sale and their businesses trying to relocate them at the same time, what that would cause? It would mean that instantly millions and millions and in fact billions of pounds would be wiped off the value of the Canadian dollar overnight. And it would cause, like we've seen over smaller events even in this country, runs on fuel stations, runs on banks, runs on food. The thing is, yes, you can survive, as somebody said in the comment section yesterday. You can easily survive those conditions if you're geared up for them. And this particular guy sounds like he got his things in order to, ride out the storm, which would last, the rest of his lifetime and generations after that. And the point is this, is that the sort of life you really want for yourself? Yes, it'd be peaceful and quiet. There won't be many people in a situation that can do what you're doing, but of course you're going to resemble the lifestyle of probably Inuits and Eskimos. Is that really the life you want? His argument was, and I take this on board as well, if there was a mass exodus from just even Canada alone, which we know it's not going to be the case, because even here in England, it surpassed more than halfway down south of the country before, we saw where the last glaciers ended. And of course we know this because of where the glacial till is today, which was all the debris that the glaciers dragged south as the glaciers were moving further south down the country. We know exactly where that was. It's around about 50 degrees, and that's why I give that 50 degrees latitude a mention yesterday, because on average that's where it was for most of the northern hemisphere. But of course, as somebody also mentioned in the comment section, if you take a look at the right hand image, which I believe was an artist impression, but nevertheless, I would have imagined that there was a bit of research that went into that impression. New York would also be one of those regions affected. So not just Canada, it would also affect northern parts of America, and maybe even more than that. And of course, there would be, during a mass exodus of Canada and other northern countries, a stampede trying to get to somewhere further safe where the vegetation is likely to support life. But what you've got to remember, we are struggling at the moment to feed 8 billion people on this planet, and when we cram them in a region where it's even smaller, and there are more people in that region, well, I'm sure that there are other aspects of science, such as survival of the fittest. The food chain can only sustain an amount of people, so numbers drop off dramatically. We see this with lots of other species, such as lions in one region. When there's too many lions in one region, there's simply not enough food to feed them all, and of course natural selection kicks in and deals with it her way, nature's way, and that would be no different from human beings. So let's go and have a look at some of the data then that supports that dramatic temperature drop, and let's have a look at what happened in the history which caused the Vikings to leave their post in Greenland, and for the possible reasons which they did. So the only other thing I want to say is, guys, we're almost approaching the end of the month. It's not been a very good month for raising money. We do have more views both on the YouTube channel and on the website. I think we've had just over 15,000 views in the last week on the website, and in the last 2 weeks not one person on there hit the donate button, which is a real shame, because they're coming on looking at the data but they're not supporting the efforts which it takes to gather the data. And we really need to do some more about that. We have got a deadline of January. Things need to dramatically change. The only way that can happen is if more people support what we're doing. Clear as that. There's a link down there in the description. Anyhow, let's get on. Before we do, let's just say a big thank you to all those that are helping, our patrons, our people that have the equipment in the fields in other countries that are bringing back the data to the UK for us, and we're able to process it and put it on the website. A big thank you to everyone, but this is something that needs to continue. I don't want to go too much on about the raising of funds, but I just want to say, how long do you think NASA would have been in business if they'd have relied on public funding? We can't even afford to have another person here at the observatory, share some of the workload. So NASA wouldn't have even begun to get off the ground, neither would the European Space Agency. If you want to force science in particular areas, then it has to come from government funding. And of course, when that happens, we know what happens. Corruption gets involved. We would be telling people that we are in a global warming situation right now, and if we don't do something about it, our kids would die in the future. It's not the case. We're delivering the truth, the facts that support the what we say, and we try and do it to help people predict possibly where they're going to be in the future as a result of these changes. We're giving them the benefit of making that choice, even though it is difficult for human beings to do, even on the basis of all the information they have. It's really hard for a human being, it seems, to make that logical decision to put themselves out of harm's way, unless it's obviously you're standing on the track and the train is about to hit you. You might want to move then, and logically you will act. But when we consider other aspects, like what we're talking about now, the exodus of Canada and most of Europe, maybe in the next 20, 30, 40 years, or even less, if the pole shift has its way, who will act on that information? Okay, there's a link down there if you want to help support us at the observatory. Let's get on with some data. Let's have a look at it. So we're looking at the two charts. We're going to begin with the one on the right, and we can see around the medieval warm period where the Vikings arrived at 1000 years AD, and then 400 years later where they left. Now the temperature fluctuation between them 2 points was just 1 degree Celsius. But you can see around 1200 years AD that it actually got colder than when it was when they actually left, and then warmed up slightly and then went back down. And I suppose at that point they thought it was going to continue going down, and they was right. If they'd have stayed there, it would have got much colder. But the deciding factor for them leaving would have been that it was getting too hard for them to, sustain their civilization on Greenland, and therefore they packed the bags. Looking at the chart on the left, we can see that around 1950s to the present time, 2020 at least, there has been 1 degree added in Celsius over that period of time. So you could say it took 50 years or 70 years. But we have to add into the factor that there is another anomaly taking place right now which could speed things up much faster. And when we look at the rate at which the Arctic ice is rebounding in this year alone, another 2 million square kilometres, which is a massive amount, it might be possible to do it in a shorter period of time than that. Just before we end, I just want to show you the difference between an interglacial period and a glacial period, so you get an idea of how fragile our climate system is to small changes in temperature. And if I said to you, would you believe that a glacial period could be 8 degrees or 8 degrees cooler than an interglacial period, and that is the decisive factor in the temperature between a full-on or the peak of an interglacial period where it's warm, or a full-on peak glacial period at that point in time. Well, there's a chart that we can show you that proves that fact. So on this chart, all I've done is measured at where the change point is with regards to interglacial and glacial periods, and that is the top green line. The bottom green line is just skipping on all those worser times where the glacial period was in full swing, or at its epicenter. And you can see that there is an 8 degrees Celsius fluctuation between an interglacial and a glacial period. So not a lot at all, is it? Doesn't take a lot. I just want to say that annually over the Arctic Circle, it's not uncommon should I say, to get minus 38 degrees, and then in the summer plus 10 degrees. So on annual changes, we see these changes happen in 12 months in any case, and much greater than what it takes for an interglacial or a glacial period to start. It's just what added things make that a prolonged period. And one of those things would be a complete snow-covered northern hemisphere would reflect more solar radiation than it would absorb, because simply snow is more reflective than land, whereas land absorbs solar radiation. Snow and ice just simply reflect it, and that could steer things in a negative climate for us, which would keep us in a glacial period even longer. So just to really summarize, and I think do it fairly and scientifically, if we can see if we can see a 1 degree shift in 70 years, then we could equally assume that it could be in the negative direction as well over that period of time. And it was the 1 degree change in Celsius that forced the Vikings off of Greenland, and they was lucky to be in a time where the magnetic reversal was not taking place at that period. So whatever extra effects are being added to the climate system right now, and we've got a pretty good idea of what those are and how they modify the jet streams and how they could change the northern hemisphere climate. We could say that it could take possibly less than 50 years to put us in a situation where we would notice the change, and it would only be another 7 degrees Celsius in a negative climate, or a negative Celsius manner, that would put us in the deepest part of a glacial period. You should just note one other thing, is where we are right now, and I showed you on the short-term predicting scale of temperature, we have hit that line which is the top line that we're looking at here on this chart, the top green line. We've hit that and we're going down. The trend shows us we're going down into a climate favouring a glacial period right now. And that is why I say, you know, countries like Canada, Northern European countries, excuse me, and Russia are going to be in the path of the coming train. And we'll discuss about those things a little bit more over the coming days on how exactly, you know, climate can affect, you know, these systems that we have in place, the technological infrastructure, and how little it would take to, you know, make those places uninhabitable for the majority of the people that settle in these regions right now. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed the content today. I've tried to keep it as fair as possible, you know, with regards to science and comparisons. If you'd like to help support our observatory and the work we do, not just on the climate and CO2 and glacial topics, but also the magnetic pole reversal, then the link is down there. The only thing to say at this point is, you know, you have a great day, and I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.